good-for-nothing parasite.
Suddenly, I was called by my husband to visit his parents' house. I figured he probably got too drunk to come home. I started the car and headed to his parents' place. But what was waiting for me there was my mother-in-law with a nasty smirk on her face. Out of nowhere, she splashed beer on me and hurled insults. My mind went blank, but in the next moment, anger surged within me. I wiped the beer off my face with my hand and said just one thing: "I'm leaving." With that, I walked out of their house. Just before I left, I caught a glimpse of some confused relatives in my peripheral vision. My name is Samantha Ayers. I'm 30 years old. After graduating from college, I've been working at a wholesale company a little distance away from my hometown. Work is going fairly well, and my life doesn't have any major inconveniences. But there's one thing that's been bothering me: my shyness. Ever since I was a student, this has made it difficult for me to make friends. Even when someone talks to me, I often respond in a curt manner, and I've never been able to join in on conversations. No matter what, I get nervous when talking to people. Yet, despite that, I'm incredibly grateful to a few of my friends who have stuck with me. When I first realized I was shy, I didn't worry about it too much. But one day, while walking down the school hallway, I overheard some people talking about me. "She's so cold when she talks, has a bad attitude, and is so full of herself." They might have said more, but nothing else registered in my mind. Knowing that this was how people saw me, I suddenly felt my legs go weak. But I knew it would be bad if they noticed I was there. I somehow forced myself to move and escaped from the spot. From that day on, I began to worry about my poor communication skills. Would I make others uncomfortable and have them talk behind my back again? Before I knew it, my shyness had become a major insecurity. And in the end, it didn't change even after I became an adult. When I left my hometown for a job, I also had to part ways with my friends I had spent so much time with. We kept in touch, but not being able to see them in person and spending so much time alone made me feel lonely. It was frustrating to realize that even though I wasn't good at talking to people, I still craved connection. The more I thought about it, the more I despised how selfish I seemed. But when I got my job, I thought maybe I could change that part of myself. Unfortunately, reality wasn't so kind. Old habits die hard, and I still struggled to communicate well at work. Luckily, most of my coworkers were kind and often started conversations with me, despite my awkwardness. Because of that, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that's why I've been able to do well at my job. But I knew I couldn't rely on my environment forever. Determined to change, I made it a point to be more proactive. Thanks to that, by the time 2 years had passed since I started my job, I wasn't as shy as I used to be. Even though I still got nervous, I could join in conversations and communicate better. But even then, I wasn't satisfied. Looking back now, it's obvious I had grown since my school days. Yet, the burden of my insecurity was still too heavy to let me feel content. But then, one day, I met Eric, who would later become my husband, and my life and perspective changed dramatically. Eric worked at one of the stores we did business with, helping out his parents who owned it. It just so happened that I had to deal with him when the usual person stepped out, and that's how we started interacting. Eric was soft-spoken and seemed to genuinely enjoy chatting with me, even though we had just met. Whenever I initiated a conversation, he would respond with a warm smile. It wasn't the first time I had met someone like that. But there was something different about Eric. I wanted to talk to him more. I wanted to get to know him better. Even though we had only exchanged a few words, I couldn't shake that feeling. As it turned out, Eric felt the same way. At first, we would chat briefly whenever he came to the office, but eventually we exchanged contact information and started meeting up outside of work. As we spent more time together, our relationship deepened, evolving from friendship into romance. And 2 years after we started dating, Eric proposed and we became husband and wife. His parents seemed kind, which put me at ease.
I'll make sure you're always happy.
Eric had said when he proposed, and those words still echo in my mind. I was sure our happy life was just beginning. Thinking about our future together made my heart race with excitement. However, it wasn't long before I discovered the true nature of Eric and his parents, and once again, I was faced with the harshness of reality. After marrying Eric, my life became richer. When I came home tired from work, my beloved Eric would be there to greet me. That alone made me happy, and on top of that, he would always have kind words to say to me. Maybe this is just normal for married couples, but for me, it was one of the things that made me feel truly blessed. Eric helped out at his parents' store while also working a full-time job. Even though he was probably busier than me, he never showed any signs of exhaustion. How's the store been lately?
Good, it seems to be going well.
When should I come help next?
Well, let's see.
I felt bad that Eric was the only one helping out at his parents' store. So I started going there more often to lend a hand.
You don't need to worry about that.
My father-in-law initially told me, but gradually they started relying on me more. I started helping with arranging products, managing inventory, and even doing stock takes when the timing was right. It was clear from our conversations that Eric and his parents cared deeply about the store, and I was glad to contribute in any way I could. However, a year after our marriage, everything took a drastic turn. The store's business began to falter. Just a year ago, everything was going well, but a large supermarket had opened nearby and customers began to drift away. We tried advertising more and increasing the variety of products, but nothing seemed to work.
What are we going to do? At this rate,
Yeah, it's not looking good at all.
Every time I went to help, my in-laws would discuss the situation with such desperation that it hurt my heart.
If things continue like this, it's not going to end well.
I could tell Eric was starting to change too. And who could blame him? His parents' store, which he had been helping with for so long, was now in danger. I didn't have the power to save the store on my own. But that made me all the more determined to do whatever I could to contribute to the store's success. Unfortunately, all that effort was in vain, and the store was forced to close. I couldn't help but feel deep regret, wondering if there wasn't something more I could have done. I couldn't even find the right words to comfort my devastated in-laws and Eric. And it was this store's closure that became the catalyst for the collapse of our marriage. The in-laws, who had once been so kind, began to treat me coldly.
it's your fault the store went under.
What? After the store closed, I was helping to clean up when it happened. My in-laws had seemed in a bad mood from the moment we saw each other that day, so I was even more tense than usual as we worked together in the same space. Then, out of nowhere, my mother-in-law, Carol, let out a big sigh and said something shocking. I couldn't quite grasp what she was saying and couldn't find the words to respond. Well, My father-in-law, David, followed suit, throwing more hurtful words my way.
Ever since you married into our family, nothing but bad things have happened. Honestly, what are you going to do about it? You're a curse.
A curse? No, that's not. Could my in-laws really believe that I brought some kind of bad luck into this family? The accusation was completely unfounded and absurd. They had been so kind before, and now their harsh words were breaking my heart. Why all of a sudden?
Do you really think it's not true? The big supermarket opening nearby, the store's business declining, and eventually going under. All of it happened in the past year, right around the time you joined our family.
That's just not fair.
Not fair? That's the truth. If you hadn't married into this family, none of this would have happened. You are a curse.
Their thinking was so irrational that it left me stunned. But wait, what does Eric think about all this? Just as I was about to turn around and ask him, Eric, who had been working behind me, spoke up.
Dad and Mom are right. Why did I ever marry you? If I had married someone else, the store wouldn't have gone under.
Even you, Eric? I was devastated. Not only had my in-laws turned against me, but now even Eric was pushing me away.
It's the truth, isn't it? You're a curse. You ruined our store, and yet you still live here like everything's fine. Have you even thought about how we feel?
Eric's expression was colder than I had ever seen. As if to support his words, my in-laws kept piling on. I wanted to run away right then, but I knew if I did, they'd just hurl more awful words at me. And yet, I couldn't find the strength to defend myself. I was paralyzed, unable to do anything but stand there. From that moment on, everything changed. Eric and my in-laws' attitudes towards me became noticeably harsher. When I came home from work, Eric was no longer there to greet me with a smile. The kind words, the cheerful conversations about our day, those were all gone.
Hey, dinner. Hurry up.
I'm sorry, I'll get it ready right away.
This is exactly why you're useless.
Eric would throw cold looks and harsh words at me before turning back to the TV. It was clear that our relationship would never return to what it once was. And even if it could, who knows how many years it would take. With his words hanging in the air, I began preparing dinner. My in-laws started visiting our home more frequently, either because they had nothing to do after the store closed or simply to torment me. Honestly, having them over so often was difficult to handle. Whenever they visited, it was only to make snide remarks about me.
You really are plain looking, aren't you? It's embarrassing to have someone like you as a daughter-in-law. Eric, why did you ever choose her?
Who knows? I don't even remember anymore.
Listening to them talk, I felt more sadness than anger. If Eric truly couldn't remember why he chose me, it must mean he's lost all interest in me.
Not remembering. Isn't that a bit harsh?
You don't really think it's that bad, do you?
Oh, you caught me.
Their insults kept coming, and it was obvious they were speaking loudly enough for me to hear on purpose. Feeling humiliated, I once tried to interrupt them. If you feel that way, should we just get a divorce? I felt humiliated and even tried to interject. But the response I got was something I never expected.
Divorce? There's no way we'd let you do that, right, Carol?
Exactly. A divorce would look terrible to everyone. And what if Eric ends up suffering because of it? You couldn't take responsibility for that, could you?
My in-laws cornered me with their stern faces, and I couldn't say a word. I glanced over at Eric, but it seemed he felt the same way. He didn't object, just watched his parents. I regretted bringing up the idea of divorce since I didn't have the courage to actually go through with it. So, I ended up spending my days in a state of confusion and frustration. About 6 months passed living like that. Then, my father-in-law fell ill and had to be hospitalized. For Eric and his parents, this too was somehow my fault. Just like with the store's closure, they seemed eager to place the blame on me.
Of course, you're a curse. Who would have thought David would end up in the hospital? He's been healthy all his life until you came along. You've ruined everything. What are you going to do about it? Can you take responsibility?
It was true that I was sad and worried about David's illness. But to blame me for it was utterly unreasonable. Even if you say that, I don't know what to do.
We're the ones who don't know what to do. This is all just. What a mess.
Carol dramatically held her head in her hands and let out a deep sigh.
Don't make things any harder on Mom and Dad.
So, it's my fault?
Of course, it is.
Eric glared at me just like his mom did. Why did Eric ever want to marry me? Being constantly accused like this made me question my own worth.
Oh, I know. Why don't you pay for David's hospital bills? We don't have any money, thanks to someone causing the store to close.
Oh, of course. We both work, so it's the least we can do. I'm really sorry about this. It's all her fault.
It's fine, Eric. You don't need to apologize for her.
Without even giving me a chance to speak, it was decided that we would cover the hospital bills from our household funds. I understood that my in-laws were going through a hard time, and I didn't mind paying the bills. But I couldn't help but feel uneasy that they didn't ask me about it, not even once. It wasn't that I wanted to interfere, but since it was a financial matter, I thought it was only fair to be included in the discussion.
What's with that unhappy face? Do you have a problem with paying the hospital bills? We've already said it's your fault he's in there. Honestly, shouldn't you have been the one to offer to pay in the first place?
Mom's right. You're so thoughtless.
It's not that I don't want to.
Don't make excuses.
Carol's shout cut me off, and I knew there was no point in trying to explain myself further. They'd only see it as excuses. Okay, I answered meekly and didn't say another word after that. Even after David was hospitalized, the attitude of my in-laws and Eric didn't improve. If anything, it seemed to get worse. Eric started talking to me more often about money.
Because of you, Dad's in the hospital. Good thing I earn a lot, huh? Who do you think you have to thank for living comfortably?
Honestly, his salary hadn't changed. In fact, I actually earned a bit more than Eric. Despite this, Eric was under the delusion that he made more money than I did, and he only became more harsh with me. I had tried telling him the truth and even showed him my pay stubs. But Eric never believed me.
Get out of here, you curse. Who do you think is responsible for all this?
Even when I visited David in the hospital, that's what I'd hear. Meanwhile, Carol continued coming to our house, only to throw more snide remarks my way. I had reached my limit. I wanted to leave it all behind and run away somewhere. Then, unexpectedly, a turning point came. It was about 3 months after David had been hospitalized. That day, Eric had gone to his parents' house early in the morning, and I was enjoying a rare moment of peace alone. But around noon, I got a call from Eric.
Hey, come over here now.
From his voice, it was clear he was quite drunk. I gave a brief reply and drove over to his parents' house. When I arrived and rang the doorbell, Carol answered with an unusually cheerful expression.
Oh, you finally made it.
She had clearly been drinking heavily. The smell of sake was unmistakable. She ushered me inside, and as I expected, Eric was there, thoroughly drunk, along with a large group of relatives I barely recognized, people you'd only see at weddings and funerals.
We got in the mood to drink, so I invited everyone over.
Hey, Samantha, you're here. Get us some water. Hurry up.
I had just arrived at my in-laws' house and was still trying to grasp the situation when Carol, wearing a malicious grin, approached me. She was holding a glass in her hand. Then she said,
Good for nothing, parasite.
and threw the beer in her glass all over me. My mind went blank. The smell of beer that clung to me made it clear what had just happened.
Feels good.
Mom, what are you doing?
The next moment, anger surged through me. I wiped the beer off my face with my hand and said, I'm leaving. I left the houses without looking back. Just before stepping out, I caught a glimpse of some bewildered relatives in the corner of my eye, but I didn't have the energy to care. I went home and immediately started packing to return to my parents' house. Every time I saw the beer-soaked clothes I had tossed aside, the scene at my in-laws' house replayed in my mind. I didn't have much to pack, so I finished quickly. I could have left for my parents' house right away, but I wanted to face Eric one last time. So I waited for him to return. About an hour after I had left his parents' house, Eric came rushing in out of breath.
Hey, what the hell is going on? Why did you just walk out like that?
Walked out suddenly? You seriously don't understand that I left because your mom threw beer at me?
She was just joking around. There's no reason to get so mad about it.
Joking around? You think it's something that can be brushed off like that? If he had apologized even once here, maybe I could have calmed down a little. But instead, he just blamed me for suddenly leaving the house. I had no reason to hold back anymore.
Of course, that's the case.
What do you mean, of course? I'm done with this. I want a divorce. I've reached my limit.
What? You can't just say something like that out of the blue. Shouldn't we at least talk this through?
Talk it through? It's too late for that. You're just going to gang up on me with your mom and blame me for everything, aren't you? Here's the divorce papers. I've already signed my part, so you can fill in yours and submit it. With that, I pulled the divorce papers from my bag and thrust them at Eric.
You actually went and prepared divorce papers?
Yeah, I'm serious about this. Isn't it normal to have divorce papers ready when you've made up your mind? So, I'm leaving the rest to you.
Hey,
I pushed the divorce papers into Eric's hands and walked out of the house. I could hear him shouting behind me, but I ignored it completely. Then I headed to my parents' house.
Why didn't you talk to us sooner?
When I finally told my parents everything, I could tell my mom was angry, even over the phone. Her concern, combined with the guilt I felt for not confiding in them sooner, made me burst into tears. I drove for a few hours and finally arrived at my childhood home. When I rang the doorbell, my worried-looking parents greeted me. The moment I saw their faces, all the strength drained from my body, and I collapsed to the floor. It hit me just how much I had missed their support. Parents really are amazing, and I felt that truth deeply. The next day, I felt much calmer. I had already explained the situation to my workplace and was granted some time off. I knew I needed to rest and recover quickly so I could get back to work. That was my plan.
I've made plenty of food, so feel free to have seconds if you want.
Yeah, thanks. The day I returned home, I had no appetite and couldn't even sit down for a meal with my family. But this morning, the breakfast my mom had made tasted especially comforting.
Wow, you're eating well.
I wasn't able to eat much before.
I see. Well, there are no enemies here. Just relax and do what you need to do.
Yeah, thanks. My dad was right. Here, there wasn't anyone who would make me feel like an outsider. Now, I wouldn't have to deal with any more snide remarks or nasty attitudes. It should be a given, but I was genuinely relieved, which only highlighted how difficult my life had been. Just as I was settling into this sense of relief, the doorbell rang.
I'll get it.
My dad said, heading toward the door. But as soon as I heard the door open, his voice boomed.
What are you doing here?
It was rare for my dad to shout like that. Could it be?
Is Samantha here? Please let me see her.
As I feared, it was Eric.
Samantha isn't here. Go home.
But her car is here. You can't fool me.
Eric was trying to assert himself, even with my dad. Neither of them was backing down, and their voices only grew louder. This wasn't going to end unless I stepped in. I stood up and walked to the entrance. Eric, what are you doing here?
Samantha, please, we need to talk. Can't we just sit down and discuss this?
Hey, quiet down. Samantha is already stressed out. Just leave.
Dad, thank you. It's okay. Eric, what do you want to talk about? I thanked my dad and stepped in front of Eric.
I want you to reconsider our divorce. You can't just drop that on me out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere? You're making it sound like this is all my fault. Have you forgotten that it was your actions that led to this?
Our fault?
Eric reached out as if to grab me, but seemed to realize he was about to cross a line and lowered his hand. You and your parents have been making baseless accusations against me. You should try seeing things from my perspective for once. By the way, where are the divorce papers?
There's no way I'd file those. I threw them away.
What? I told you to submit them. I had suspected he might do that. But now that it was confirmed, I couldn't contain my anger.
And how do you think you're going to live after divorcing me? You can't just keep relying on your parents forever. You were living off my income after all.
I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What are you talking about? I showed you my pay stubs multiple times. You're the one who refused to believe them, accusing me of forging them. Don't worry about me. I'll be fine. All I want is a divorce.
You say that, but it's not that simple. I'm your husband, after all.
Don't act like a husband now. Besides, wasn't I just a curse and a parasite? If that's how you see me, then wouldn't it be better for both of us if we got divorced? I'll send you another set of divorce papers. But for now, just leave. If you come back again, I'll call the police.
The police?
He looked shocked, as if he hadn't expected me to go that far. Eric left the house in a daze. I thought this might finally stop him from coming to my parents' home. But knowing Eric, there was always a chance he'd do something unpredictable or conspire with his mom. I let out a heavy sigh, realizing that I might still have to deal with some unsettling days ahead. 2 weeks later, Eric and I were still not divorced. I had sent him the divorce papers, but he just kept tearing them up. I was starting to think I need to get a lawyer involved when Eric reached out, asking me to wait a little longer. I could have ignored him and gone ahead with the legal process. But my anger had cooled down by then, and I decided to grant him this one last request.
All right.
I replied and waited for him to contact me again. However, a month and a half later, I received an unexpected call from Eric.
Did you really move out?
The truth was, I had moved into a new house. It was a luxurious mansion worth over $1 million. Like Eric had mentioned, I didn't want to impose on my parents indefinitely. So I had started looking at properties and found a place that perfectly suited my tastes and lifestyle. Of course, I hadn't told Eric about it. I felt a chill down my spine, wondering how he found out. What? How do you know that?
Well,
Spit it out. After I raised my voice, Eric finally confessed.
I hired a private investigator.
What? A private investigator? My voice echoed through the mostly empty mansion.
Well, I thought if we were getting divorced, maybe I could claim alimony if you were cheating on me. So I figured I'd have someone look into it.
Cheating? What on earth are you thinking? I've never done anything like that. If anyone should get alimony, it's me.
You have no right to alimony. And how did you manage to move into that huge house? You shouldn't have that kind of money.
That's none of your business. I can do whatever I want with my life. As I said that, the noise on the other end of the line suddenly grew louder. I barely had time to brace myself when the next voice I heard wasn't Eric's.
Why hasn't the money for David's hospital bills been transferred? What if he can't stay in the hospital because of this?
Well, since we're getting divorced, I didn't think it was relevant anymore.
Not relevant? We've told you countless times that it's your fault he's in the hospital.
Could you stop with the baseless accusations? It's really annoying. I wasn't the same timid person I used to be. I wanted them to understand that, so I didn't hold back my words. Carol seemed a bit surprised by my new attitude, but she quickly tried to steer the conversation back in her favor.
How dare you speak to me like that? Listen, I know where you live. If I have to, I'll come over and talk to you face to face.
Oh, you want to come to the house? Sure, go ahead. You already know where I live anyway. I realized there was no point in continuing this conversation over the phone. It wouldn't lead anywhere. So, I made a bold decision and invited Eric and Carol to my new home. You probably want to talk face to face, right? When would you like to come over? Carol seemed caught off guard by the invitation. But seeing an opportunity, she quickly began discussing her and Eric's schedule with an eager tone. A week later, Eric and Carol arrived at my house. The look of astonishment on their faces as they took in the unfamiliar furniture and amenities was almost comical. Please have a seat right there, I said, directing them to the new sofa I had bought, and began our conversation. So, what is it? What did you want to discuss by coming all the way to my house?
Oh, well, it's about David's hospital bills. What are you going to do about them? It's infuriating that you're living in a house like this. And how could you afford a place like this? Are you secretly seeing someone else besides Eric?
It's a bit much to handle all at once. But first of all, didn't the private investigator confirm that I wasn't cheating? Carol seemed extremely agitated. The old me would have been intimidated, but I had nothing left to fear. Regarding the house, the truth is I've been trading Forex.
What? Forex trading? You never told me.
I had been trading Forex since before I married Eric. I hadn't made much profit at first and didn't think it was worth mentioning to anyone. But over time, I got the hang of it and started earning significant profits. By the time I was making real money, my relationship with Eric had deteriorated so much that I didn't feel like sharing it with him. Besides, I was afraid that if I told him, he might try to take all my money.
Are you saying you bought this house with that money?
That's right. And by the way, I was also paying your dad's hospital bills using the profits I made from Forex trading. I thought it was better for our household finances that way. But since we're getting divorced, I don't need to pay anymore, right? So, I've stopped making those payments.
You did all that behind my back?
I was transferring the money from your account to your mom's account. And if you make more money than I do, like you always say, then you shouldn't be so worried, should you? Even though I had kept my Forex trading a secret, it was strange for Eric to be so panicked given his past statements. Who was it that kept saying we were only able to live comfortably because of him? From what I've heard, it doesn't sound like you were counting on my income at all.
I never said that.
Really? You're going to deny it now? That's pretty pathetic.
Pathetic?
It seemed like the two of them were struggling to process everything. But I wasn't going to wait for them to catch up. I pressed on, delivering another blow. And by the way, what was all that talk about me being a curse? How does it feel to know that the so-called curse was the one paying your hospital bills? Isn't that embarrassing? And from the looks of it, you're still trying to get me to pay for things. Honestly, that's just pathetic and immature. Actually, the fact that you've been making baseless accusations all this time is pretty childish.
But I didn't know anything about your finances.
Still, asking me, the curse and parasite, about David's hospital bills is just wrong. Shouldn't you have been talking to Eric about that?
Eric said he didn't know.
She said that and then looked at Eric. Her gaze seemed to say that she was not to blame.
Wait, me?
Do you even know that your dad is in the hospital? Why aren't you keeping track of these things? You've dumped everything on me, and when something goes wrong, you blame it all on me. This is unbelievable. Why did I ever marry someone like you? I finally had the chance to throw back all the complaints I kept bottled up for so long, and both Eric and his mom turned away from me. Is there anything else you want to talk about? If not, then we're done here.
Wait, please.
As I tried to end the conversation, Eric suddenly jumped in.
Now more than ever, I don't want a divorce. Please reconsider.
I'm asking too. Please think it over.
At this point, it was clear that they didn't want to stay married to me because they loved me, but because they were after my money. It was almost laughable, but I wasn't in the mood to be amused. Enough. I've already told you I want a divorce. All you care about is my money, not me. It's disgusting. Here, these are the divorce papers, so sign them. I've got plenty of copies, so don't bother tearing them up like before. I won't ask for alimony, but if you keep pushing me, I might change my mind. Oh, and if you come to my house again, I'm calling the police. Got it? Fueled by anger, I thrust the divorce papers at Eric. Realizing that I wasn't going to change my mind, Eric finally signed the papers and left with his mom. It felt so satisfying. At that moment, I picked up the signed divorce papers and let the reality sink in that it was all over. I felt the tension leave my body. After submitting the papers, the divorce was finalized. In the days following the divorce, I received countless emails from Eric complaining about how he had fought with his mom and couldn't afford his dad's hospital bills. He also told me that their financial situation had become increasingly dire, but that was none of my concern. Similar messages came from my in-laws, and it was infuriating. David even tried to gain my sympathy by describing his condition, saying he was in pain, suffering, and asking for help. But there was nothing I could do. And since I hadn't visited him, I couldn't even be sure if what he was saying was true. The only thing I could do was guess that he might actually be in better health than he claimed, based on his voice. I did answer a call from Eric once, but all he talked about was money.
Hey, you're still making money, right? Couldn't you give me a little?
All you ever talk about is money. I'm not going to help you. You'll just have to deal with it. I shut him down and hung up the phone. After that, I ignored all contact from Eric and his parents. Thanks to that, a month after the divorce was finalized, the messages completely stopped. It's been a year since our divorce was finalized. I'm living a comfortable life on my own, but I still haven't quite gotten used to the size of this mansion. Even though I have no intention of getting married again, living alone can be a bit lonely. So I decided to get 2 cats to keep me company. I'm currently living a happy life with my 2 cats. Both my job and Forex trading are going well, and I'm glad I got divorced. Every morning, I wake up and start a day that's no different from the one before. I think to myself, what should I do today? What should I eat? As I mentally organize my day, I start preparing food for the cats.